husband and father-in-law tried to set me up with a rich guy just to test my loyalty. Well, guess what? The joke's on them. I fell in love with him. And I'm getting married to my new lover, who, by the way, is rich. I'm not sure I made the best decision in getting married to my husband, Pete. Pete and I met while we were both undergoing our master's degree program in the UK. My family lived there while Pete had come from the United States. Things were great between us. Pete even took the lead and the initiative as the man in the relationship. I didn't have to spell out things to him before he knew what to do to please me. I'm what most guys would call a pretty lady, so it was normal for me to have several guys interested in me. Some of these guys were maybe rich or more rich and handsome than Pete, but I am loyal. I never harbored the thought of cheating on him even once. The pestering gradually became too much, and it got to the point where Pete began feeling insecure. He did not want some random dude taking away his lover. This led him to propose, and we got married while we were still undergoing the program. I didn't welcome the idea at first, as I place a high premium on my career. So, I asked him to wait till we're done studying and had both secured jobs. Well, Pete was impatient. He claimed money was not going to be an issue as he was from a rich background. Yeah, his claim was true. I know most ladies in my shoes would find it attractive that a guy is from a rich background was in haste to spend the rest of life with me. But I did not want to rush things, especially as it could put my career in jeopardy. Pete had a solution for every excuse or reason which I gave as to why we could not get married immediately. He promised to never let our marriage stop me from having a fulfilling career. To cut the story short, we got engaged. I took him to meet my family, and we were finally wedded into a small ceremony. His parents were not present as they stayed in the US, but I think they FaceTimed both of us to wish us a happy married life. They equally asked that we come to visit them once we're done with our master's degree. With the way the parents related to me over the phone, I was eager to meet them in person. Pete and I were finally done with our master's program, and I became a certified data analyst. We began making plans to travel down to the US of A to visit his parents, and it was around that time that I got invited for a job interview at a big company. This was my dream job, and I got it. Pete seemed happy for me. I was to resume my new job in 2 weeks, so Pete, which meant that 1 month we planned on spending with his parents, was going to be cut short. We finally traveled down to see his parents, but the story took an unexpected and unpleasant turn. I got to my in-laws' place, and I was warmly received at first. They seemed elated to see me, and Pete was the only son of his parents, but he had 3 junior sisters, who were my age mates. It seemed like I had gotten into one big happy family, the kind of family where every lady would want to find herself. It was all an illusion, though. Dinner was served, and while they bonded over the meal, the whole thing took a distasteful narrative. See, my father-in-law began asking me questions about myself and about my background. I did my best to answer politely, and he suddenly asked what kind of lady would get married to a guy without first all going to see his family in person, or even running a proper check on his background? Well, I was shocked by the question because it seemed like he was attacking me. I waited for Pete to jump in and say something in my defense, as this was what he had always done, taking the initiative to protect and please me, but Pete just kept quiet. This was the first time I would see him keep quiet or even act dumb when he was supposed to speak up. I mean, he was the one who had insisted we hurriedly got married in the first place, so it didn't make sense that he kept quiet. I guessed it was because of his parents and the way he was brought up. After it was clear that Pete's response was not coming, I went on to try dousing the tension that was building up by playfully noting that my father-in-law was right, but I had fallen in love with their son, and I never thought for once that I would not like his family. My father-in-law hissed at my reply, before turning to his wife to comment that the children of these days lack sense of proper home training. His statement was offensive, but I just smiled, not wanting to upset my in-laws. Pete quietly just sat there eating his meal while his father berated me in the presence of everybody. Later that night, I confronted Pete about his inaction at the dining table. He gave no reason. He just apologized and told me to be patient with everybody. I never settled in well, and the next few days were just miserable. My husband made the whole thing worse as he acted as though he was under the influence of his parents. I began counting down the days left for our visit to be completed. I made up my mind to stay as far away from my in-laws as possible. I don't know if my in-laws read my mind, but something happened. Well, something always happens. My husband Pete approached me 3 days before we were to leave to tell me we had to cancel. I laughed as hard as I could. I felt he was joking, but he wasn't. I asked for an explanation, why he wanted to cancel our trip, and he said it was his father's idea. I felt stupid because I cannot understand if I've gotten married to a man or a boy. I tried being patient, so I asked when our stay would be over so I could call my workplace and seek an extension, though it would paint me as a very unserious employee. To my amazement, Pete said our stay would be permanent. Well, I reminded him of my dream job, which was just waiting for me back in the United Kingdom, and he said his father had said they would get me a job here in the US of A. I was fed up with hearing my husband tell me his father was the one calling the shots in our marriage, so I just went to take it up with my father-in-law myself. I told him about how I had a dream job waiting for me back where I came from, but he said my marriage was important, way more important than some job. My father-in-law went on to say that couples, especially newly wedded ones, should not have to live apart from each other. He said he was simply looking out for us, so I appreciated his concern and I understood where he was coming from. However, I told him that Pete and I spoken about this before now, and we are okay. My father-in-law was irritated by my response, which he was also disrespectful. He said Pete was part of the family, and since I was married to him, I'm family too. It simply meant that I was to follow the family pattern. I didn't know what to do. Pete had promised that our marriage would not stand in the way of my career, but that's just what is happening. Weeks passed, and what was supposed to be a short visit turned into a permanent stay. I felt bad telling my family over the phone that I had relocated to the United States with my husband and would not be coming back. It was the most painful part, was when I had to call the firm where I was supposed to resume work to inform them that I was no longer interested. The whole thing was traumatizing, but neither my husband nor my in-laws even cared. As the day progressed, I found myself staying back at home when everyone else went to work. This included my sister-in-law. I reminded my husband about the promise that was made to me about getting me a job, a promise that he was yet to even fulfill. He then promised to talk to his father about it. The mention of his father got me even more upset. We could not have a normal discussion in our life without him bringing his father into the equation. I began talking to him about the need for us to rent our apartment. I knew it was the only way for us to have a life as a couple, because as long as we were with his family, we would remain under their influence forever. Pete just evaded the topic of moving out. I did not expect him to do what he did next, though. His father summoned me 2 days later to ask if I was being treated badly. On the inside, I was like, yes, of course I am. But I knew all hell would break loose if I said or gave a genuine answer, so I replied in the negative. He then went on to ask why I would be trying to cut their son away from them by mounting pressure on him to rent a house so we could move out. I was shocked as he stood there asking this question. Pete had taken all we discussed and handed it down to him? Huh? There was just no form of privacy between us. I went on to explain that my father-in-law that, hey, I'm a career-driven person, and that staying at home would do more harm than good. I reminded him of the fact that it had been months since the promise of getting me a job was made, but there was no result so far. To not make it look like I was unappreciative of his efforts, I told him the reason I had asked Pete to rent a house so we can move out was simply because I felt it was the right thing to do as a young couple who just got married. My father-in-law's expression lightened up and he said he understood how I felt, but still maintained his ground that it was no good. Well, you still have a lot to learn. The longer you stay with us, the better you become at homekeeping. There'd be time for you and Pete to rent a house, but what's the purpose of renting a house when you cannot take care of it? He said those words to me, and his question was once again very offensive. What did he mean by me not knowing how to take care of a house? I'd been staying back, cooking the meals, doing the dishes and chores, while everyone, including his 3 unmarried daughters who looked like they needed the home training more than I ever did, went to work. It was just outright wickedness. Just be patient and follow the process. That's what he kept on saying as he tried being dismissive. I was about to leave when he informed me that the helpers they have employed would be going on temporal leave since I was around. I didn't get what he meant by since I was around. What did my presence have to do with their employees taking a leave? It was though he could read my mind and he gave the answer. My father-in-law said that I was going to be handling the chores in the house, and this would make me learn how to better take care of my own home. The implication of his statement meant that I would not just be a stay-at-home wife, I would officially become the maid of the family. A family that had 3 grown-up girls my age. I returned to my room, and I just can't help thinking about the kind of mess I've gotten myself into. Do I get a divorce from the marriage that is barely 1 year? What would people say? How long would I have to wait and be patient with my husband and in-laws before they would deem me ready enough to leave the home with my husband and pursue my career? Should I call my people in Europe to inform them about what I'm currently going through? What would you do if you were in my shoes? What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. Today's relationship drama story is such a roller coaster. OP is in a horrible position with abuse left and right. I would like to know what you guys would do, but there's multiple updates to get into. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and click that subscribe button for daily videos, and let's see what's going on with update number 1. The humiliation I suffered at the hands of my in-laws has gone beyond the home. They now do it in the presence of anyone like I'm some sort of trash, while the man I got married to just sits back and does nothing. After months of not getting a job as they so-called promised, my husband finally approached me recently to let me know that they found a way around the whole thing. He claimed that one of his very good friends who was a software engineer had started a company sometime last year, and he needs a data analyst. According to Pete, this said friend, who goes by the name of Jeff, would be coming around for lunch and I was to do all I could but to make my first best impression. I decided I was going to put in my best effort since getting a job depended on it. The day finally came and I cooked lunch. Since it was the first time I would be meeting with Jeff, I never knew his preferences as to how he loved his meals, so I decided to, on the side of caution. I made it a bit less spicy, but healthy. My father-in-law was around and the whole family was present, and the moment he took a bite of the meal, he made a derogatory comment about me still finding it difficult to make a decent meal after months of living with them. This was embarrassing, and he should not make me look like this before the man who was to be my employer could ruin my chances of securing the job. He suddenly looked at Jeff and apologized for the meal as he said that I was slow in learning. but would come around soon enough, and I looked towards Pete to see if he would jump into my defense. But he played dumb just like the other times. I was shocked when Jeff, who was supposed to be angry, played the role Pete should have played by springing to my defense. He told my father-in-law that I had made the right choice in not getting the food overly tasty, as that was one way to eat healthy. I know I was supposed to make a nice impression on him, but the moment he said that, he made the very strong impression on me. And I wondered why Pete could not have said such a thing, and why Pete could have such a friend and yet not know anything about defending your wife. I had my meal in silence as I listened to them talk about work. After we were done with lunch, Jeff thanked me, and I could tell it was genuine. And I not simply just because it was the right thing to do, or because he wanted to make me feel good after I was initially embarrassed. Jeff and I spoke, and though I was expecting him to ask more questions, he just engaged me in friendly conversation. I got to learn that besides his startup firm, which operated remotely, he equally acted as a consultant at some top firms. He was really on the money. He informed me that he would be coming around in the next few days, so he could get me properly geared up and informed about what his expectations of me were. Update number 2. Hey guys, so I don't know, I just initially felt like I was reduced to the level of a maid. But the situation is far worse because even a maid gets paid. I'm a slave in my husband's home. It had been a while since my husband Pete gave me some money for my upkeep. The only time money got to my hands in the house was when I was supposed to run an errand to the grocery store. My patience is running dry, and Pete no longer has time for me, and if not for the fact that Jeff came around, the situation would have been worse. The relationship between Jeff and I did not seem professional. He was just cordial. He was supposed to be putting me through work expectations before he officially employed me, but we rather spent the time chit-chatting. I would not lie, I seriously just enjoyed his company. My birthday was yesterday, but Pete paid no attention. While we dated in the UK, Pete never waited for a reminder. He always looked for days that were important to me to show me how much he loved me. But he almost left for work yesterday without so much as wishing me a happy birthday. I was the one who called it to his notice, and he apologized for forgetting. He then promised to leave work early enough so we could go out and spend some time. I was looking forward to as I've never gone out since I've arrived in the United States. I had just been at home playing the role of a maid. I waited in anticipation for Pete to call and ask me to prepare, and though the call came, it was rather a disappointing one. Pete called to inform me he had an emergency at work and would not be able to meet up. He, however, said that he had pleaded with his friend Jeff to take me to a very nice place. I was not happy with the fact that Jeff and not my husband was the one taking me to the first outing. This was an avenue for my husband and I just to spend some time together. It wasn't supposed to be Jeff. All the same, I appreciated the fact that I was going out. I needed the fresh air as I felt like a caged animal. Jeff showed up at the house a few minutes later, and after I dressed up, I could see his jaw drop in surprise. He complimented my look, and it meant a lot to me, as it has been a while since somebody finally appreciated me. Jeff took me to a very expensive restaurant, and for the first time in months, I ate something I did not spend hours cooking. We went to see a movie, and things nearly got out of hand. Everyone present at the cinema was a couple. At some point during the whole thing, Jeff and I got so close that it seriously just felt awkward. We almost kissed, if not for the fact that I pulled out and apologized for being too close. He equally apologized for getting carried away by the whole thing. I asked to leave, and, well, he drove me home. He finally gave me an iPad for my birthday present, and I thanked him a lot. It was the only present I got for my birthday, and I got home to find Pete snoring. As I lay on my bed, I could not help but wonder how close I had come to kissing my husband's close friend on my birthday. I know, it's pretty inexcusable, but I would not have been in that position to start with if my husband had not prioritized his work over me. Update number 3. The whole saga with Jeff, it just got me upset. I had not called him, and he had not bothered to come visit in the past 3 days like he usually did. I was upset because the more I tried to deny it, the more I saw myself thinking about Jeff, not my husband. I knew it was not right, and I had to put things in check before they got out of control. So, I decided to speak with my husband about us taking apart. To be alone just to rekindle the flame that once burned bright between us. Pete was about to leave for work when I met him at the lounge. I proposed a weekend getaway where we would spend time alone. He was initially giving me the listening ear, but the moment he heard his father's footsteps, he said that there was no time for that. What he had said could not settle down with me. His statement was an indirect way of saying there was no time for me. Here I was, trying to save our marriage, and he's just feeling less concerned about it. I was at my breaking point. I began an argument right there in a bid to make him see he was pushing me far away from him, but he reacted. He claimed that rather than be grateful, he was working himself out to make sure I was comfortable. I was busy advocating for a meaningless weekend trip, so I broke down in tears and just ran out of the home. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. I just knew I needed to be far away from everything. I cried as I ran, and people looked at me like I was a mad lady. After about 30 minutes or so, I called the only person I knew I could reach out to. Jeff. He came and picked me up where I was. He took me to his home so I could cool off. I cried while explaining to him all that happened as of late. Jeff embraced me as I cried. I was jolted out of my fears when his words stopped my tears instantly. Marry me. I was somewhat irritated. I did not believe what I heard, so I pulled out from his embrace and looked him dead in the face to see if I had heard him correctly. He repeated the same words, and he was serious about it. I rebuked him for trying to take advantage of this trying time that my marriage to his close friend was facing, but rather than apologize, he just informed me that my husband and his family had been humiliating me on purpose. He went ahead to show me the chats, messages, voice recordings that he and Pete had shared, where Pete asked him to make advances at me and all. He confessed that he had been going along with the plan, which he felt was too extreme, and he saw the way I was just unjustly treated at home. But he fell in love with me along the way. He even noted that though he operated as an independent contractor to huge firms, the said company that he was running was a lie. It was all made up so I could spend time with him. This was the same reason why Pete had refused to take me out on my birthday, and even turned a blind eye to all the degrading things I suffered in the house. They were doing it because Pete's father had claimed I was a gold digger who was after his son's money. The shreds of evidence that Jeff showed me were absolutely glaring. I'm currently staying at Jeff's place, and he has not put any pressure on me regards of his proposition. My husband has not called me, and it's been up to 24 hours since he's last set eyes on me. Oh boy, what a marriage. Update number 4. This is my 3rd day at Jeff's house, and my line has been switched off as I did not want anyone reaching me. My husband came over to Jeff's place yesterday to ask if I was there. I'd pleaded with Jeff to keep me staying here at his house just a secret. He agreed. Jeff acted surprised that my husband Pete was looking for me, and he claimed he had not seen or heard from me. He asked Pete what happened, and Pete claimed I just blew things out of proportion a few days back while we were arguing. I was listening in on the conversation, and most of what Pete was saying was not entirely true. He admitted that his father may have been a little hard on me, but it was all a test by loyalty. Jeff asked him if he did not feel like the whole loyalty test was being taken to the extreme, but Pete said his father was still not convinced that he was married to him out of pure love, and not for the money. Pete began asking Jeff if I had made any sexual advances at him so far. My heart was cut to shreds as I listened to Pete doubt my love and faithfulness towards him. How could he play such an expensive game with me and my feelings? How could he let me be humiliated in front of his family and still call it a game? Jeff told him that I had not been unfaithful to him, even though Jeff even tried to seduce me himself. Jeff was asking these questions just to prove to me what he had earlier said to me, and the proof he had shown was true. After hearing all Jeff had to say, Pete replied that I was probably at a hotel somewhere, since I had no friends around and would return once I ran out of cash. Jeff asked what he would do when I came back, and he said this: "I guess I would just have to convince my father that we put an end to the whole thing," was all Pete could say. I'd been hoping before that all Jeff's accusations were false, but after I listened to their conversation, whatever feeling I had for Pete immediately turned into hate. I broke down in tears the moment he left. Jeff rushed to hug me, and I felt comfortable in his arms, and I brought down every form of restraint I had in me, and we had sex. It was clear that I'd fallen for Jeff, and I decided that I'd take on his proposal of divorcing my husband Pete, and I'm getting married to Jeff. It is good, and well, it's a good thing I don't have children yet. I would be going to their house to get my things, and though I plan to divorce Pete, I would not let him have it the easy way. Update number 5. This is the final post by OP. The first thing I would love to let you know in this final post is that justice has finally been served. After staying at Jeff's place, I went over to my in-laws' place to get my stuff. I went on a weekend when I knew the whole family would gather together. They were all shocked when they opened the door to find me standing outside. Everyone seemed concerned and worried. They wanted to know where I had been all this while, but I ignored them. Walked straight to my room and began packing. Pete follows me in there, and the moment he saw me packing my bags, he became utterly terrified. He knew it had something to do with the fight we recently had, and possibly with the way the whole family had been treating me like from, ever. He started apologizing about the whole thing with the claim that it was all a game and he was sorry. I didn't even say a word. I just kept on packing my things in silence, and after I was done, I walked out with everyone looking at me. Pete tried stopping me, but I snubbed him till I got a cab and left the house. While Pete was busy trying to process all that happened, I slammed him and the divorce papers. It included mental trauma and emotional harassment. The paper hit Pete as a surprise, and he began calling to ask Jeff to talk to me, and to see if he ever saw me. Jeff and I were having the time of our lives in his house, but we kept Pete in the day. The day of the divorce hearing came, and both Pete and his family members gathered together at the court. His father-in-law, who, by the way, had been the chief tormentor, met me before the hearing and began to try to talk me out of it. He apologized for everything that happened and said, though it was all in a bid to test my loyalty, he had gone too far. He promised to have everything fixed if I just called off the divorce and reunited with his son. You know what I told him? I told him to duck off. The hearing began, and the shock of everyone present. Jeff was called upon the stand as a witness. He told the judge about how he was initially sending my husband, as his in-laws are, to try to seduce me, and how they had treated me badly. It was after he had seen the maltreatment with his own eyes that he decided he could no longer continue with it. Pete and his family could not deny the accusations as there was countless proof, undeniable proof. The judge dissolved my marriage to Pete and he was demanded to pay me half of the money which he owed. Jeff and I left the courthouse and I went back to his place. We'd be traveling to the United Kingdom by next week where we would be getting married. We plan on establishing the imaginary firm which my ex-husband's family had made him lie about. I know my family in the UK would be surprised at the recent development, but I'm pretty sure they would understand once they heard me out. Oh yeah, one more thing. I would be sending Pete and his family an invite to our wedding just before we leave. And that is just going to be the salt on top of the wound. I'll be honest with you guys. The invitation at the end of the story to invite her ex and her ex's family to the wedding, it was icing on top of the cake. I would like to know what you guys think of this. OP was just treated so poorly. There were so many comments in defense of her. So I want to ask you guys this. If you could give OP just one word of advice, what would you tell OP? The same OP that left her entire career behind to go with this man who was nothing more than a giant red flag. Go ahead and drop your comments down below, guys. Let's discuss it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Mr. Reddito. I animate and narrate stories daily. So if you want more stories, and by the way, I try to find every single update, go ahead and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.